Okay, let's try to keep our time, although we are a bit late from the beginning. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for being here with me for this panel that will talk about environmental disasters and soil decontamination, but also about water decontamination. I'm very glad, and I wanted to thank Valéria Drummond for helping us organizing this panel and other panels in this important forum. And say that we are very happy to be here, being able to talk about some very important issues related to all countries, which is this of environmental disasters and soil and water decontamination. My name is Maria Cecilia de Brito. I work for Instituto Ekos Brazil, an NGO from São Paulo, but working in all the country, where we develop different projects, conservation, biodiversity conservation, impact assessments, and other work like that, and also particularly remediation of soil and water. So not taking too much time in this very short presentation, I want to introduce you very briefly to my colleagues that are joining this panel. Olivier Moaye, who is going to give his points for us, who will explain a bit about his experience, who is going to be followed by Sunder Eskes, also a very experienced professional in this area, and who is going to talk about some hidden environmental disaster aspects, those that we are not going to see almost all the time. And Marco Falconi, who is also a professional related to these issues, and who is going to say raise some points in relation to the environmental disasters and what to do in the aftermath of the event. Just to finish this very short part, I wanted to add something to what I described about Olivier, which is a very important point that I wanted to highlight here, and which he's going to talk about, which is the need to build trust and credibility among stakeholders when we are talking about this time of very complex environmental problems. In Brazil, as you might know, we've been facing big disasters during the last 5 years. One in the Rio Doce watershed, a watershed that is shared by 2 states, where we had the biggest environmental disaster ever due to a mining company and the failure of one of its dam tailings. And the other one, which also belongs to the same mining company, which killed more than 100 people, and of course led to an environmental disaster in the region as well. So these 2 are not the only environmental disasters, unfortunately, in the world, but those are the main disasters related to these types of impacts in Brazil in the short period of time. So with no further talks from my side, Olivier, I invite you to bring your points to the audience. As you know, we have a short time, and I ask you to keep as possible the 10 minutes for your presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'll do my best. I mean, we could talk for hours about all these issues. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I understand people are joining from all over the world. I want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to this challenging panel to share our experience and explore solutions on how to best solve those complex environmental issues. I'm also here very happy to join good friends, Cisa, Sunder, and Marco. First of all, my name is Olivier Moaye. I work with Golder Associates, part today of WSP. And I want to give you a quick summary of my own history in the environmental field. My experience is in the contaminated land area. I've been dealing for the past 35 years with contaminated sites, small and large, very complex for some of them, lasting decades and costing millions. And I have this experience in Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Northern America. I also had the chance of living in Africa, Asia, France, Spain, Brazil, and the US, and therefore with a good multicultural experience. I don't know how much of our audience today is familiar with contaminated land issues, so I thought it would be good to give some perspective here. We have seen throughout the last 30 years a lot of evolution in our profession, along with the society. In the beginning, cleaning up contamination consisted of basic solutions like digging out contaminated soils and sending it to landfills, or simply capping and containing the contamination in place, or extracting groundwater through pumping, treating it, and discharging it in a river, sometime for a very long time. Remediation was done first to achieve threshold limits in soil, water, air, and sediments that were based on what we knew then of human health and ecological risks, and usually with very little or little understanding of natural processes occurring in the ground. Those standards got updated as the years passed and new data came in, becoming more stringent or less. In the mid-90s, we developed some much smarter and practical approach, which was based on risk specific to the site and its future use, what we called site-specific risk management. We also developed and still do today a lot of smart technical tools to characterize, collect, analyze, archive, visualize, and manage data, which gave us much better understanding of the physical, biological, and chemical processes in the ground affecting those contaminants. So data back then, going in the beginning, was very expensive and rare to get. But today, thanks to all of this research and development, we are able to collect a huge amount of data on a single project and manage this data very efficiently. We have tools allowing to characterize a site in real-time conditions to move much faster into remediation, and also helping us measure the performance of remediation very efficiently. Where I want to get with this short history is that the toolbox available to us today in 2021, and which keeps improving every day, is very wide. We have a lot of tools to play with. However, our profession, which is a mix of scientists, consultants, governmental agents, lawyers, noticed along the way that a lot of remediation projects on environmental issues were failing and had to be revisited, sometimes even restarted all over again, and very often, especially for complex and sensitive cases, like the two cases that Cecilia was mentioning. The remediation strategy and solutions that were thought to be the best were generating adverse impacts in terms of use of energy, water, chemicals, greenhouse gas, but also, and this is very important, in terms of social aspects. For example, when a very sophisticated technical solution is imported from a Western country and implemented in a place where remediation experience is much less, lacking resources. With the evolution of all the society towards being more mindful about sustainability and natural solutions, a group of our remediation experts started in the mid-2000s exploring how we could solve these cases using a more sustainable approach. It became what we called sustainable remediation. In 2008, I joined this community. So I worked since then in this community. We developed a lot of learnings and lessons learned. And one of them was that it was essential to consider social aspects in our project, not only focus on the technical aspects and the economic aspects. In 2011, I moved to Brazil, where with a few other professionals, we started Nicole Brazil, which became Nicole Latin America. And our mission is to share best practices and develop further the sustainable remediation practice. And in 2018, with the Ekos Institute, we organized the first SUSTRAIM International Conference in the Southern Hemisphere in Sao Paulo, which gathered about 400 people. We used as a logo for the conference the iceberg concept, considering that what we know today about the issues we are facing this is only the tip of the iceberg. A source of contaminated soils can impact a huge amount of groundwater, representing the submerged part of the iceberg. Out of this conference, the SUSTRAIM 2018 conference, and thanks also to the vast international experience that came, we came to key learnings in order to be successful on solving those environmental issues. First, it is essential to build trust and consensus among all the stakeholders involved in the project. And in order to do so, you need to be credible, both technically and ethically. You need to bring simple and practical solutions, focusing, for example, on local resources. And you also need to remain open-minded with a broader view than just the site itself and the sources of contamination. You need to look well beyond the boundaries of the site, considering the whole territory around it. You need to stay open to new solutions like circular economy, land stewardship, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the climate and biodiversity crisis, etc. And two things came out very clearly out of the SUSFRAME 2018 analysis. First, we need to be very careful in jumping to conclusions too fast, trusting too much engineers and experts. And I am myself an expert, so I know what I'm talking about. It is key to, first of all, have a clear vision of the end product, a strategy and a plan for what you want to do with the site. Then only you can play with the toolbox. The second thing, even more important, is that there is something missing in the way we've been doing those projects. How could you build trust and consensus, be credible, when all the stakeholders have conflicting agenda? The problem owner responsible for the environmental impacts, the environmental providers, the consultants, the lawyers, paid by the problem owner, the governmental agents limited by a legal framework, the public society itself. We all have different agendas. So how do you bring everyone at the table to agree on the best vision and objectives? How do you do that right at the beginning before starting a project and investing energy and efforts which often get wasted? Imagine how complex this is when you are facing impacted soils and groundwater coming from multiple sources of contamination. And there are plenty of examples like that in the world. It seemed to us that the missing piece that could make this happen, similar to a catalyzer, was to have in the center of those stakeholders what we call the NGO solution, consisting of a small group of experts with high credibility and neutrality under a non-profit organization and tasked to do exactly that, build consensus among the stakeholders, agree on a vision and objectives for the project, and then develop a strategy and a plan for the project. We then explored this concept during the Ekos 2020 conference last year in Sao Paulo, around a complex and large case in the city, a neighborhood called Jurubatuba, with multiple sources of contamination impacting the aquifer, the deep groundwater. We formed a group early in 2020, representing the main stakeholders, the industry, the lawyers, the state and federal regulators, consultants, and a couple of very senior people, very experienced in governance issues. We all agreed first on the vision for Jurubatuba, the objectives, and then we organized the group in 5 work groups: governance, communication, legal, financial, and technical, with mission to come up with an integrated strategy and a plan, like what we call a roadmap for the project. And all this work was done during the COVID-19 crisis. And we reported back our learnings to the public during the Ekos conference last year in October, coming with what we all think is the best approach, using the NGO solution that I was talking about and implementing a regional deep groundwater management program. And Sunder, I'm sure you're going to tell us much more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for keeping the time. It's a very intense work, and of course, many details that I will try to wrap up in the end of this session, if I'm able to put all those big things together and good thoughts. Sunder, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Cisa. So welcome everybody. My name is Sunder. I'm a consultant at Worley, at Vision Consulting Group, and I'm also affiliated with the Instituto Ekos in Brazil, who was behind the initiative in Jurubatuba that Olivier was mentioning. So, after Olivier sketched the problem, what are we talking about when we say we're looking at the tip of the iceberg? When you look at urban groundwater, it's really a hidden environmental disaster because traditionally people didn't value urban groundwater all that much because it was considered contaminated. So people preferred to, define wellhead protection areas far away from cities, like in the dunes or in nature reserves. But today, if you look at a city like Sao Paulo, which is almost completely dependent on surface water for its water supply, and which suffers from periodic droughts, then urban groundwater becomes really important as a strategic water reserve. And so it needs to be managed better than we are doing today. When you talk about Sao Paulo, it's one of the most densely populated regions in the world with about 20 million inhabitants. It has very few green areas and a history of groundwater contamination, mainly as a result of industrial activities. Now, Sao Paulo state has a good environmental legislation and government agencies that try to solve these soil and groundwater contamination issues, but ongoing and completed site remediation projects may only represent the tip of the iceberg, because the deep urban groundwater often contains large contaminant plumes that have migrated beyond site boundaries and beyond the reach of site-specific interventions. And so that becomes a problem, like who's responsible? I mean, so such complex areas often require a regional approach in terms of contaminated site management. So what we did after the process that Olivier was sketching is to propose a regional program, which is basically based upon 4 pillars: prevention, regional monitoring, hydraulic control, and shallow source area and plume intervention. So what does that mean? When we talk about prevention, we talk about proper sealing of unused wells. We talk about soil protection measures. We talk about regularly updating pumping restrictions, and also about awareness campaigns to discourage the use of illegal and potentially contaminated wells by the population. In terms of regional monitoring, we need to monitor particularly groundwater quality. So we have the Regional Water Board, the DIE, which does this, but at a state level. So in many countries, they have national monitoring programs or state level monitoring programs. But for the urban groundwater that we're talking about here, to manage that properly in a city the size of Sao Paulo, we really need a municipal groundwater monitoring program. And now the problem becomes like, who's going to pay for that? So certainly the water board doesn't think the water users should be paying for that. The district attorney says that the problem owners who contaminated the groundwater should be paying for that. But then again, the state environmental agency doesn't agree with that. So we have a real conflict situation. And what we are presenting here is trying to solve this through a regional program. One of the nice things about such a program is that there's a lot of unused wells. There's thousands of wells, deep groundwater wells in Sao Paulo city. And a lot of them are abandoned or unused. So besides sealing those, we could be thinking of converting some of those into multi-level monitoring wells, because we can't take good decisions without data, without good data. So this regional monitoring program is a key element of the regional program, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Now, the third pillar is hydraulic control. So what you can do is so once you have the good data in terms of regional groundwater quality, you can then develop models and decision-making tools that enable state agencies and also at the local level to take the right decision. And that means you can say to someone, okay, don't pump here or pump there, or pump there and treat the water because it's contaminated, but make it available for reuse. So all these recommendations for treatment and reuse you can make once you start sharing data, once you start getting good management tools that you can base your decisions upon. And that's right now, that's lacking in Sao Paulo, and we believe it may be lacking in many large cities, in urban environments, in developing economies like Brazil, India, Russia, and China maybe. So the fourth pillar then, shallow source area and plume intervention. So once you have good decision-making tools, you can start clustering and prioritizing source areas. So for instance, is it really important to remediate source areas in this particular city block because it doesn't contribute that much to the regional groundwater quality, whereas other source areas may be highly important and should be prioritized to improve the regional groundwater quality in the urban environment. So there are some good examples of that around the world. There's the INCOR initiative in Europe, which involved cities like Stuttgart and other cities in Europe that actually implemented such a program where they were able to prioritize intervention measures, soil and groundwater remediation measures in those areas so as to maximize the effect in terms of mass flux reduction to the regional groundwater. So that's something we're proposing in this regional program as part of these 4 pillars. Now, for such a regional program to be successful, there's a need to convince the main stakeholders to participate. And in particular, the problem owners that are partially responsible for the deep groundwater contamination. So we can think about industries, we can talk about laundry, small commerces that do laundry. We can talk about maybe real estate development companies that have contaminated land that they don't know what they have to do with that. So the value proposition of the regional program basically is threefold. We want to create a regional fund to implement a program with financial mechanisms that limit the contribution made by problem owners over time. So in other words, we avoid creating an internal obligation. So we've done, with different work groups, we've looked at the numbers, and this is actually possible. So within a limited number of years, the program would actually pay itself. So the other value proposition would be the suspension of existing civil action lawsuits. So this is very important because right now, each problem owner fights his own battle against, third-party claimants or against the district attorney. And so they're spending millions on legal fees. And, after 10 years, the groundwater will still be contaminated. So instead of each and every problem owner fighting its own legal battle, we're thinking of suspension of existing civil action lawsuits and their replacement by a collective agreement, offering more legal security to the participating problem owners. Now, we've presented this idea to the district attorneys in São Paulo, and they were very enthusiastic about the idea. So this is one important value that we are proposing. And then finally, problem owners participating in the program, they'll get access to shared data of high quality and innovative management tools that they can actually use to explore the groundwater in a responsible and sustainable way. So by doing that, they're not only ensuring their capacity to use groundwater, and so their insecurity in times of drought, like will there be enough water to continue my industrial process? Will there be enough water to continue doing what I need to do? They'll be able to mitigate that risk during droughts when they have access to good quality groundwater. And finally, through this program, participants can label their action under a sustainable and socially responsibility program, because it would surely help them score well on their ESG programs and other sustainability score charts, because you're actually using a groundwater resource that is finite, but you're doing that in a responsible way. So, Cisa, this was the summary that I wanted to present on our regional program that we, like Olivier was saying, we're going to test this year in the Jurubatuba district in São Paulo, but it could be implemented very easily in other districts in the metropolitan area of São Paulo, as well as in other cities across the world.
Thank you, Sunder, very much. Again, you brought the development of this program, which probably is going to be used not only in São Paulo, as you said, but other places in the world that face the same types of problems through this roadmap and through these premises that you've raised. And I will try to come back to them after Marco. Marco, I just wanted to mention that probably what is going to be a very important point that you are bringing us today is that all those things that we are discussing here, Olivier brought, Sunder just brought, might be related to what you're going to tackle, which is how to work in the aftermath of an event of soil contamination. So depending on how people do this, we will have more or less problems, we will have more or less trust among stakeholders and conflicts. So the floor is yours. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. My name is Marco Falconi. I work for ISPRA, that's the Italian Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm one of the people responsible for controlling the remediation projects in the 42 most polluted areas in Italy that are called sites of national priority list. Going to the topic of this session, the environmental disasters, in Italy we have a definition of environmental disaster that is the irreversible alteration of the equilibrium of an ecosystem or the alteration of a balance of an ecosystem that is particularly onerous and achievable with exceptional measures, or an offense to public safety by reason of the relevance of the fact that the extent is very, very high. You know, the definition is just a first step. This does not prevent environmental disasters, and sometimes the environmental disasters imply more countries. I make some examples, like my knowledge that we have in Italy and Europe. We have an example of transboundary pollution of Lake Maggiore, that is a wonderful lake in Italy, where a fertilizer chemical production released PAH, DDT, and mercury. And as the facility is in an alpine river, you know that gravel arrives till 100 meters below ground surface. So it is 100 meters of soil contaminated by those chemicals, and the contamination arrived to the river, to the Lake Maggiore, and also to the Switzerland, because Lake Maggiore has a side of the Lake Maggiore is on Switzerland, up gradient. And that's a first case that I want to tell. A second one, it is ever in Italy, it's Acna di Cengio. It is a facility that was there from 1882, I mean 140 years ago, to 1999, that was used for explosives, fertilizers. And we found there in that site all the periodic elements of Mendeleev, hundreds of compounds and intermediate, just 250 compounds we monitored there. And there was a difficulty in management because there were two regions involved. And as Olivier told, not ever the priorities are the same. Also, if in the public sector, no, different regions could have different opinions on the environment, the industrial perspective or the environmental perspective, and those happened in this Acna di Cengio. And imagine that it happened. For instance, they used to discharge into the river these sodic salts, and they do it when the river was high. No. It happens that they release the sodic salts in the moment that the river was in the summer, and it was very low. And it happened that for 100 kilometers, they killed all the fishes and even the mosquitoes, And they have the courage to say, "Oh, we disinfected all the river." No, imagine the period, the historical period when it happened. It is unbelievable. Another case that is very recent, because it was condemned 44 people with 280 years of prison globally. It is Ilva in Taranto. Maybe you know from the newspapers in Europe, at least who is in Europe, that Ilva is biggest steel production park with 15 square kilometers in the South Italy, in the Taranto region, when it's the major polluter of air in Europe, with 1.2 tons of benzene every year. I don't make the numbers of this facility, but the more important is that that facility had an impact on brackish water, the so-called Mar Piccolo in Taranto, on health, because a lot of illnesses in the population, and also in the food chain, with a number of cows that were killed because full of dioxins, not only the milk but also the meat, and that's the incredible situation. We have also other environmental disasters, like we have in Veneto region, like PFAS plume of more than 50 kilometers, with health problems for the population, with endocrine disrupting PFAS are endocrine disrupting chemicals, are cancerogenic. We have birth defects according to PFAS, but PFAS is very debated in the world right now. It will be the class of contaminants of the next decade, probably next 2 decades, and so it's very, very important to address those environmental disasters. Just to escape from Italy, I worked also in a plant in Serbian Republic. It was Viscosa in the city of Loznica, where we found a carbon disulfide that were stored there with just a small layer of water. I stayed just in front of those reservoirs of carbon disulfide. I can stay just for 10 seconds, because otherwise you had something in the nose that you have to escape, full of asbestos. And so the environmental disasters happens not only in the third world countries, but also in more developed countries. So, coming to the solutions, and I try to save some time. We have an emergency response, of course, when we have arrest and contamination. You have absorbers, you can evacuate people, you remove the source. As you know, many environmental disasters are also into the sea. See what happened just in the coastline of Sri Lanka just 2 days ago. No, so this is an emergency response. Then we have a long-term response to the environmental disaster that are most cases that we have. I agree, first of all, with Olivier and Sunder for what they told. You have to try to find an integrated solution for those environmental disasters. You have to find a new destination for those sites, maybe industrial or whatever, but you have to find a new destination. Then a provocative thing, fiscal incentives. Why not? We have, for instance, in Italy, fiscal incentives for new freezers. But why we cannot give incentives to the companies that are not the polluter of that area, that want to invest in that area? This is incredible, according to me. I have 50% back money for a new freezer, and I cannot have anything back if I want to invest in a contaminated area where I'm not the polluter. That's incredible, according to me, that we should do something. And another 2 things that I want to highlight, and I then give you back, Maria, the floor to you. It is that we should keep our markets open to new technologies. We shouldn't be protective. No, if we were a new technology that is disruptive, I mean, for instance, high resolution site characterization that you, Sunder, in Brazil, I know that there are many companies that are applying this kind of new characterization. I think that is fantastic for understanding the problem. And then very last thing, sustainable solution. Olivier already told the commitment of Nicole in Latin America and all the SURF. There are SURFs, Sustainable Remediation Forums, throughout the globe that want to find sustainable solutions, spend well their money, not do nothing, spend well the money. That should be the way we can solve the problems of environmental disasters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Very good points. And thank you also, like our colleagues, to keep the time. I have only 2 minutes to do some comments on what you've said. Of course, I won't be able to bring up all the good ideas and the good experiences you all brought, but unfortunately, our time is really short here. Just wanted to mention some of the main aspects I was able to take note, and of course, I will probably be losing some of them. The first one in regards to knowing the place, knowing the disaster in terms of what it brings to a region, making sure that we study it, although the emergency is, of course, very important to be dealt with at the first time, but to have good data to understand what is happening there in order to do a good work in trying to solve all that happened. Olivier brought this issue and also the issue of talking about, as I mentioned in the beginning, building the trust, building responsibility together, bringing, of course, some new ideas like circular economy to this discussion, which was also said by Marco just now, reminding us the need to think about the conflicts between those different stakeholders. Sunder somehow brought us one type of solution to all those problems, explaining what we are doing in São Paulo, which is a huge city, as he mentioned. And so, of course, all the things that we decided to do are dependent on the stakeholders and the conflict and divisions they have. Also, Marco brought us these difficulties, mostly talking about something that we're not facing in Brazil in this regard, which is this transboundary problems. How do you deal with transboundary problems, different countries and all of that? So unfortunately, I'm not going to say anything else. I would love to be here listening from you and discussing these very important issues. I hope we brought some different type of vision to the Water World Forum, something that is not only important, but sometimes is kept hidden, like the underground water, as either Olivier and Sunder mentioned. These are environmental disasters that are not usually in the government's or businesses' agenda, and we have to deal with it because water is something that we cannot lose. And water in many places are already lacking, and people are suffering from this situation. So my colleagues and friends, I do thank you very much again. I would love to be with you for a more longer time. And again, I appreciate the opportunity given to us by the forum, and I hope we have other good discussions during the other days that are to come. Thank you very much, and have you all a good day.
Thank you, Cisa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Obrigado.
Bye-bye.